What are the craziest ways you've heard of people making money? In college, I take a class on how to start and run a small business. Prof tells us to think of ridiculous business models for our fictitious businesses, as we will get more out of the class that way. Stupid ideas ensue. Selling paper clips door to door, refilling car gasoline tanks in people's driveways, service to read and summarize the newspaper to executives, etc. One classmate decides he is going to sell tumbleweed. Guess who quits college and started a successful business? Tumbleweed guy. Takes a van to the desert, collects tumbleweed and sells them to Hollywood movie and TV studios who need them. Keeps the tumbleweed in a warehouse, and since they never spoil, his only costs of gasoline, storage, and a website, he eventually becomes the #1 tumbleweed provider to studios around the world. Shipping tumbleweed globally. Made a heap of money selling what millions of people drive by and ignore every year. Heard of crazier, but a guy I know, friend of my mother's, went to Texas 30+ years ago. We are from Norway, and he noticed every single garden had a trampoline. And it was almost always Jump King, the circular with blue mat ones. So he went to the HQ, bought 10 and took back to Norway. Within days they were sold, and he ordered 50 more, same thing. So he became the only importer and has God knows how many millions to his name today. A cabbie in Dublin once told me a story about one of his fares who had a brilliant hustle. The guy was a sculptor. He would watch horse races, then when a horse won, he'd use social media to contact the owner directly with a digital mock-up of a life-size sculpture of the winning horse. Now, the people who own winning race horses tend to be very rich. We're talking sheiks, oligarchs, billionaires. Every now and again, one of these owners would bite and spend €100, €0 or so on a statue commemorating their animal's win. Dude only did a couple a year and spent the rest of the time living the good life. What a great deal just to be horsing around. Richest guy in a rich town near us makes enormous amounts of money buying Hershey bars and rewrapping them with customized retirement celebration designs or corporate logos to be given away at events. Literally just rewraps them in pieces of paper and doubles or triples his money. Man, I think I found my new niche. About 4 years ago, I noticed we started running out of Ziploc bags quickly every week. Turned out my 10-year-old at the time was mixing gummy bears, worms with Hispanic spices and chamoy sauce then, selling them at school for $5 a bag. She was bringing in about $100, $150 a week. She is now about to turn 15 and I helped her build her candy business and she has her candies in stores in our city and is still expanding. When I worked in a really busy, upscale restaurant, my coworker would put all of his cash-paying customers' bills on his credit card and keep the cash which he used to promptly pay off his credit card. He did this all day, every day for quite a while, and the points started to add up and he was getting free airfare, etc. Worked great for a while until management noticed a rise in credit card processing fees with an emphasis on one employee and they shut him down real quick. There is an English girl who helps wealthy Chinese parents give their kids suitable English names. It is common in East Asia that kids have secondary English names that they use in English class and often also later in life when, for example, traveling for business. People send her photos of her kids and she suggests a name for, as far as I remember, 50 British pounds each. I went to college in a capital C college town. A friend of mine bought an old school bus, fixed it up and took out all the seats. At the end of every semester she would drive around the neighborhood that was the fancier side of off-campus living and collect whatever the rich kids were thrown out before they moved. Went home for the summer. Flat screen TVs, couches, computers, tables. It was wild to see what people would chuck out and replace the next semester rather than having to deal with getting a storage unit or moving themselves. Sold it all on Craigslist over the summer or the beginning of the next semester and made a killing. Medical studies. There's an entire website, gela.org, where you can find studies to participate in. I actually did several. My best being one where they had to brace my leg and for a month I couldn't use it. They took 3 pieces of my muscle in my thigh. The study was to see if the drug would help muscle growth in the leg that wasn't getting any use. It was like $12,000 for 1 month. I would do it again. I was cringing thinking of the known drugs and muscle tissue being taken. But then $12K. Yep, I'd do it in a heartbeat. I considered donating my eggs for similar dollar before. I realized how consequential that would be having biological children running around. Friend I went to high school with became a millionaire because he figured out this service of just maintaining the tire pressure of car fleets of big companies. He confronted them by random checking on the parking lot the pressure of some cars and provided them a data-driven calculation how much they could save on gas per car per year by just having the tire pressure regulated, having it multiplied to the numbers of cars of the fleet, and took a commission on that difference in exchange for the service of regulation their tire pressure once in a while. All big firms were customer in no time initially invested only in a van and a compressor, inflating tires all day. Now he owns 2 villas with swimming pool and a boat. I knew a woman whose job was literally to sleep. A local office building owner wanted somebody on site 24/7 to be the point of contact with first responders if they ever needed to be called. So they hired her to come into the building in the evening when the maintenance crew was finishing their work, and she would settle up to sleep for the night in a bedroom they'd set aside for her. In the morning, she'd hand the building back over to the office employees and go on about her day. No first responders were ever called. It's about the least stressful legitimate job I could ever imagine. Probably reduced their insurance costs to have someone on site. Win-win. I forget the exact circumstances, but a few years back some religious group gathered a lot of momentum and followers saying the world was going to end on a certain date. There were a group of atheists who opened a business that advertised that when the rapture happened and all the Christians went to heaven, they would take care of the raptured people's pets. A bunch of Christians signed contracts and paid non-refundable deposits. Then surprise, surprise, no rapture, and the atheists walked away with a good deal of cash. Brilliant in my opinion. They must have forgotten all dogs go to heaven. Back in the 90s, I knew a guy who put an ad in the classified section of the newspaper which read something along the lines of, "For $10, I'll tell you my secret to making easy money. Send $10 cash to address to find out how." People would send him $10 and he would then instruct them to put a classified ad in the newspaper telling people to send $10 and how to make money. I had about 8,000 shares I had bought when assets under management had surpassed market cap in mid-2020. Right as things took off at the start of 2021, I sold for about a $36K profit. If had held for another week, I would have had about $1-2 mil. That was a lesson learned. I have a friend who 3D prints vehicles for model railroad layouts and sells them for a fraction of what the mainstream manufacturers are doing. He started this about 18 months ago and is pulling in $12,000 per month and is growing almost exponentially. A guy after high school called a company overseas who made RFID chips. He asked, "Can you make these flat and circular?" So they did. He then called a poker chip company and said, "I have these flat discs I was inserted into chips. Can your company do that?" He then filed a patent and was granted the patent for RFID and poker chips. He printed millions and sold them to just about every casino in Vegas and elsewhere, right out of high school. A guy I grew up with does contracts with high-rises to change out their inside light bulbs. He has 3 houses now and drives a Boxster. When I was in high school a kid, I was kind of friends with bought a web domain and just filled it with hentai. He made a lot of money off of that revenue that he then used to buy research chemicals from a lab in China, which he then sold to all of our classmates. My mother-in-law also had a very profitable business for a while where she would fly to Paris and load her luggage full of expensive perfume. Then she would put them into tiny vials and sell them to department stores as samples for an unimaginable profit. When I was a kid, there was this huge mansion complex or whatever near my dad's office. When I asked whose house it was, he said it was the person who invented the way they fold Kleenex tissues so that when you pull one out, another pops up. Thanks for watching.